Very good morning. Welcome to this edition of Morning at NTV's Big Story. We are, getting into the mid part of January. And for the most part, many of you will always complain that January is such a hot month. Not so much about the weather, but certainly the heat is felt in the pocket. And I think we've seen some, all this bile and violence being spewed over presidential golden handshakes. It's not so much because the money was a lot, but simply because we can't imagine for the life of us in our broke state in January that we have people that receive this humongous sum of money. And so, of course, an angry man is usually a broke man. And for all intents and purposes, you've heard it all being said that the economy is struggling. And yes, it's struggling not just for individuals like you and I, but it's also struggling for the state. Not so long ago, the Ministry of Finance did make releases to government ministries, departments, and agencies, and there was a significant cut in what was budgeted for and what was eventually sent to them. That shows you that certainly we're not doing well as an economy. And I'm sure you also know for a fact that, well, prices for some commodities have gone up. The situation is certainly not good. And January, I am told, appears like it has 60 days, especially for salary earners. They just can't wait for payday, and that will come a long way to come. Also, the cynics will say, well, you have always known it. There's no time in the calendar across the world where December has never been followed by January. So while you're spending lavishly in December, always remember that after that will be a moment of reckoning, which is January. In all this, what am I trying to put before us? Is that the state of the economy is just hard, and of course, fiscal discipline now is not something you really want to talk about because it's a bit too little, too late. However, we can ask a few questions and see how to get out of these financial doldrums that we find ourselves in. That is a discussion this morning on The Big Story. Muhumuza, good morning, welcome to the show, and Happy New Year. I haven't seen you this year.
Yes, Happy New Year, thank you.
How's everything going?
It's going on well.
A bit more grey on your hair.
Yes, like, this is 2017, so I've added another 1 year in my life.
It's very interesting.
That comes with some grey hair.
You are, of course, an economic analyst and a doctor of economics and everything economics.
Sure.
Is the situation as bad from your theoretical standpoint? You see, even when you say the economy is doing very well, for me, realistically, many of us, the economy is doing badly. Yes. But you economists say we are having 6% growth, GDP, blah, blah, blah. The usual words you normally say, show growth. Now we are saying the situation is so what?
Yes.
How is it in your theoretical world?
It's not even the theoretical world, because the theoretical world is a picture of the reality. And we do capture two things. One is that big picture, the economy can grow when it has not grown for Simon. So it is possible for the other figures to be true and for your situation also to be true. And I think that is even becoming more true globally because of what we also call inequality. If you look at the American economy, Uganda, of course, our figures are usually rare, but this year we'll get new figures about poverty, inequality, and all those kind of things. You both will give us new figures. But if you look at the American economy, because of them, they compile their figures more regularly. They are telling us between 2011 and 2015, the growth in America, about 95% went to 1% of the population. So similarly, when you look at Uganda, a lot of people are below the poverty line. And the
what's the poverty line?
And the poverty line we are following up, we have been using $1 a day. But the international practice has moved up because, as you've said, prices are going up. What the dollar used to be 20 years ago definitely is not that powerful anymore. So people are trying to capture the reality you're talking about so that the economic numbers speak to the reality of the people. So the agreement is let's move to $1.90. Now when you do that, you'll find about 34% of Ugandans, you're talking of about 12 million people, maybe more, are earning less than 5,000 a day. Around there, 5,500. Now break up 5,500, what can it do? Literally, a bottle of mineral water is 1,000. A liter of milk is 2,500. Your money is finished. So that's why you're seeing the people are hard pressed. So the reality is out there, and the numbers actually speak to that reality. But many times, the truth is not very good for people to share. So very many people want to brush it aside and then pick out only the other thing to say, no, but the economy grew by 5%.
So it's selective.
It is kind of selective reporting, but also the 5%, remember, is below. I always say our target for Uganda is 7%. So every time you hit below the target, no praising yourself, you have remained in that class. Remember?
Yeah, but at least there is something called growth that you're talking about.
Yeah,
Could
but
have been negative growth.
These days, people no longer remain in classes. I remember when I was growing up, you find somebody has been in primary for 12 years.
Now they actually in primary for.
Now they just keep moving, they just keep moving. So the truth is true.
Fred, when you look at the budget cuts that the ministries, departments and agencies of government have realized in this first quarter of this year, and there is a countrywide target to hit middle income status, there are a number of assignments these government agencies ought to do. There is there are wages to pay and all.
Sure.
When you have such a shortfall, how do you think it will be compensated for all? Can we say there won't be something called service delivery that we as citizens should expect?
I think in the first place, even as we say budget cuts, for me, I've been involved in these budget things. And sometimes I see an unrealistic budget to begin with, which is destined for these cuts. Because you are saying, I am going to realize 12 trillion.
13 actually. For
now, the budget we are looking at, the one that is coming next year, there is a forecast of 14 trillion. You have already said the economy is hard pressed. And the taxes come from that economy. The taxes come from me and you consuming mineral water, voting on airtime and all those sorts of things. So if you already see that your sources of revenue are strained, why do you target 14 trillion? Because at the end of the day, come January the other year, you will be saying, I didn't realize the revenues I expected, so I'm cutting the budget. But for me, that's not a surprise. You should have seen it come. You should have seen it,
yes, forecasting.
So the budget cuts surely shouldn't be a budget cut, because we can't plan for it early and say, don't even promise them that money, because it's not going to be there. I can understand the World Bank suspended funding. Let that be a budget cut, because you can say, when I began the budget, it was on the table. But for one reason or another,
it was off the table when it came to Spain.
But even you could have prevented that, because the World Bank gave genuine reasons. And you could also have seen that coming up, because if there is a project running for 5 years, and it is in the 4th year, you have spent only 17% of it, what do you expect of the lender? If this is a money lender, he doesn't mind what you do.
Of course.
But remember, the World Bank is a development bank. It wants to come back and say, I didn't just lend to Uganda, I was able to move Uganda from this point to the other point. So it's bound to be concerned about that, so you can clearly see there is a likelihood the World Bank will cut. So these are not shocks for me. We need to cut the budget and government to fit, as they say,
cut your coat
according to the cloth you have.
But then now it comes to the compensations that we're going to see. For the most part, what do you think is going to be the biggest casualty? Is it salaries and wages, allowances, travels, or actual service delivery?
Service delivery has already been suffering, because basically the way the budget is structured, there are those you call statutory expenditures, which you are mandated to do. Whether you have money, go and borrow and do them. One of those is payment of interest, the money we have borrowed. This particular year, government budgeted 2.2 trillion to pay interest. The next year, preliminary information I see, they are budgeting for 2.7 trillion. A few years ago, about 6 years ago, maybe less, that used to be below 1 trillion. So interest payment has been rising very fast. As we speak, it is possibly the number 3, number 4 share of the budget. And this is not for debate. So the moment you remove those kind of obligatory expenditures, the remaining money you must pay salaries. Because if you hire people, you give them contracts, you must pay salaries. Now, if you have any little money left, that's when you get into service delivery issues.
What? Yet service delivery should be at the core, should be at the forefront.
Now, that's the reason we are saying you need to restructure your government and say, why am I paying people who I have no money to give in order to deliver service? Yet I'm paying them to deliver the service. So you need to get back and say, maybe I reduce on the number of people I am paying so that I pay few and have a balance for these few to deliver the actual service. So service delivery is already suffering. And that's why you'll get to any institution. You don't have to be a hospital. You'll go to the schools. You'll go to everywhere. In the judiciary, there are backlogs. All those fellows, by the way, have been waiting for justice. Some of them you have a land and there's an injunction until court resolves it. Now, if for 7 years the court hasn't resolved it,
no production is going on.
So that service is really needed for the economy to move on. And these are some of the things that are haunting the economy. So we need to go back and revisit. How do you structure government towards the objective of service delivery? Begin with the end and work backwards. When you have little money, that's what you do.
But Fred, you are always having these incredible magic bullet solutions to the way the situation is. One wonders, do these people in government ever listen to you?
I think that's the whole point is a magic bullet. If you don't have a gun, it's just a magic bullet.
Yeah, it's just a magic bullet.
If the gun is with the other guy,
and the guy doesn't load your magic
and
bullet,
the guy doesn't want to put in the magic bullet or doesn't want to fire it, is another matter. But that doesn't stop us from discussing as Ugandans to say there are issues. And some of these you discuss, as they say in my place, you're telling the people above so that the people below can hear. So part of this message is for the citizens, because some citizens are relying on government functionality. So you are telling them,
forget it.
If this functionality of government doesn't happen, chances are don't invest. And I know people have been blaming and saying it is the lack of money, it is interest rates. But some people actually, you want to tell them don't even borrow even if the interest rates go low. Because your business is not going to survive simply because your partner, which is government, hasn't done the part they are supposed to do. And chances are your business will also fail. And thus you see this a lot in the other sectors like the oil sector. You are expecting Talo, you are expecting Sinok, Total to invest. But before they do their part, government must have done its part. So there is no way these guys will get to the level of investing in drilling the oil before the pipeline is done.
For sure.
And when they see how fast is the pipeline going to be in place, going by Uganda's standards of investment, that can take you 5 years.
Oh, yeah.
So these guys will also delay their money. So some of these things, as we say, is to give a message to both to say, if government does this, then you can respond. But if you don't see that happening on the side of government, please be conscious with your money, because you're bound to lose it. So the advice is both to government and to individuals.
But let's get down to the natural calamities that are also affecting this economy. We are seeing famine ravaging this whole place, and we are looking at agriculture, which has been our competitive advantage in the region, failing and falling flat on its face. Why? Because we have for the longest time been relying on environmental interventions to bring to us rains and the natural seasons. Getting down into embracing technologies like irrigation, you saw in the president's end of year message, those who can afford irrigation, please do it, but we'll also try to find you cheap loans from ADB and all that. Isn't all this just, I mean, how are we going to transform a society that doesn't know mechanization of agriculture at this point in time? Or are we saying let the natural calamities hit us, let the financial situations hit us? Maybe then shall we realize that no one owes us a living and we become innovative, like the Egyptians did when they invented the shalluk.
Exactly. That's another reality, because I think Uganda is a blessed country. It's a part of Africa, gifted by nature, all those kinds. So somehow I think there's been an element of laxity, and we haven't thought through. Winter taught the Europeans that they were not going to plant 2 seasons. You have 4 months of a good weather, use it and store in your silos.
Store in your silos, yes.
So some of the things have come to change, and they have changed for good. We are not going to be in charge of weather. There has been environmental deterioration. They call it climate change. For me, it's a cosmetic word. You used to call it environmental deterioration. It has become worse. And that reality is going to be with us for a long, long time.
True.
So we need to be looking beyond even irrigation. We're not going to irrigate the whole of Uganda, because the whole of Uganda is not endowed with that much water within reach of these small segments of gardens. If you have big farms of, say, 500 hectares or 1 million hectares, then you can get water from 100 miles away to irrigate.
True.
But majority of Ugandans have a hectare, 2 hectares, and the nearest source of water is 10 kilometers away. You're not going to fetch water 10 kilometers away to irrigate half a... So for those fellows, irrigation is going to be even not a solution. So we need to broaden out. And I've been discussing with people in agriculture. The scientists have some of these solutions through research. Let's now begin to find drought-resistant varieties. I was saying, look at upland rice. The people who grew rice in Asia for generations were growing it paddy rice in wet areas. But they realized not everybody lives near those wet areas. Through scientific engineering, they were able to come up with rice that could grow in higher lands. And that's what we are growing in Uganda as upland rice. So we also need to realize that there are certain crops which can mature within 2 months, because the way you deal with short rains is shorten the gestation period for your crops. And science is ready to do that for you. So we need to have a candid...
Science doesn't come cheap.
It doesn't come cheap, but this is why we have to go through that. If you want it cheap, you're going to die. That's what happened to the dinosaurs. The crocodile survived. And for me, this is why the government budget should now be thinking of going. Because a drought, and you don't look at drought and growth of on a year-by-year basis. You've got to be forecasting to say, if drought is here for continuity, what should I be doing now to prevent this kind of environment in 2023? Begin your science now. So let's get money into narrow, Let those scientists begin to research. Let's get money to see what else is in the world. So the seeds wealth creation is distributing should no longer be the normal seeds that are going to be hit by the drought once they get to the gardens. They should be the right kind of seeds, and we should have been informed by science on what do we want to put out there for these individuals. So for me, those are the concerns that we need to be putting on the table, that even as we are budgeting, the budget for agriculture is growing. Where is the money going? Is it going to help us resolve and have a versatile sector 5-7 years from now? As you have said, the Egyptians don't wait for rain. But over the centuries, they have evolved to adapt to that hostile environment. We can do that as well.
Fred, as we conclude this program, obviously what we see here is solutions that may take quite a lot of gut from individuals, not so much expecting a lot from the government as this, because the government in itself is also struggling with how to...
We expect something from it as well.
Yes, and so from your advice to individuals, what should they do? Tighten their belts, live in a frugal environment? Yeah, we've talked about the agriculturists who need to ensure that they have to look out for, being creative and look out for drought-resistant crops and all that, short-yielding crops. But what about the other individuals who may not necessarily be involved in production? The ones who work hard and a salary, but have to go and look for a liter of milk that is fluctuating from 2,000, the next time it's 2,400. Who knows, could hit the 5,000 shillings mark?
I think that's the whole discussion, to say, is your income going to grow? Because the prices are certainly going to be going up. And food for some households in Uganda is 45-50% of their income, food costs. The food prices, we don't expect rains until March. So if we plant in March, you don't expect a harvest until May and June for most of our season crops. So that means we are all going to keep eating the little that is wherever it is, either in a granary or in a store or in somebody's pit. Now, as it becomes even smaller and smaller, those quantities, as they reduce, the prices are going to go up. So one thing that is very sure, food prices are going to go up. If your income is not going to go up, then you need to be adjusting in a frugal way to say, is milk really necessary? Do I really have to eat that meat? And save money for April, because your April salary is going to be more strained than your February salary, because the prices in April will be higher than they are in February. So don't say, as long as I go through February with a zero balance, April will be asking for more than the salary you've had. So we need to be saving for those days. We need to be rational on what we spend on. We can defer certain things that we plan to do. If there is a birthday, please don't spend money celebrating. It will still come and you'll be older, but don't spend your money celebrating that birthday. You can defer it, you can cancel it. Be frugal, be real to yourself, as we said. Don't be talking like the other people will be saying, oh, we have grown, we are big, we are where. This is you. Fit in your shoes and walk the path, because it's going to be a very difficult path up to possibly June for food and for many other things. So I think we need to get down to realities and size up. The year is beginning. We will go through it. Uganda has seen harder times. And we have been hardened for those purposes. We are human beings.
As human beings, we may survive, but the government doesn't seem to learn from its past circumstances.
That is unfortunate.
Here we are even attempting to build a money printing factory at home with all the challenges that would come with.
That will be
maybe
very
what do you think about getting a currency manufacturer?
Well, I had the discussions, and I didn't buy the discussions on the pro side for building it, because people are saying we cut down costs, we spend this much, but of course that thing has costs. Even the material for printing money is not cheap. So some of those costs were being charged, they're actually realistic, and we're not going to cancel them. Because we too would have to buy material for printing money, would have to hire the people, would have to get the chemicals, and by the time you look at those costs, how much are you saving?
I mean, if we are able to leak emails coming from the inner sector of State House...
The hardest part is the discipline. Somebody will run down before anybody notices, and has printed a few billions and they're in the market. And that will take us to Zimbabwe. Whereas we said inflation was 1 million, as we begin a meal, pay. Because if you don't pay then, by the time you finish the meal, the price has changed. That will be inflation in Zimbabwe.
That's a very interesting one. Fred, it's always a pleasure having this conversation with you. Very illuminating, and obviously teaching on how we as individuals can live in a frugal circumstance in such hard times, but also importantly how governments can react to the changing times.
Sure.
Have a wonderful time, and thanks for being with us. For you viewers, always a pleasure having you joining this conversation. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, very insightful here. When he speaks about economics, you may think it's something as easy as ABC, but certainly it isn't, because it deals with the harsh realities of realizing that you have to cut your coat according to your cloth. Number one, if one, you have a coat, or two, if you have cloth, sometimes you have neither and no need for either, and that's what they call a dead man walking. Good morning. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, having another conversation on a similar emotive subject. Good morning.